week, we saw a 17% increase in COVID infections here in the great state of Oregon. And China has now, kind of opened up, and there's just probably something close to 1 billion cases of COVID going on in China. What's that going to do with mutations? What's the state of the COVID pandemic right now? And also, we're hearing about the possibility of a coming flu pandemic. Let's check in with Dr. Eric Feigl-Ding, the epidemiologist, senior fellow with the Federation of American Scientists, the first whistleblower on the COVID pandemic, former faculty member and researcher at Harvard Medical School and Harvard's T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Dr. Eric Ding, D-R-E-R-I-C-D-I-N-G is his Twitter handle. Dr. Feigl-Ding, welcome back to the program. So where are we at right now with regard to the COVID pandemic as a country and as a people?
Yeah, thanks for having me back. Well, people want to pretend the pandemic's over. It's not really over. And honestly, it's not over until ventilation, air disinfection, all these standards are implemented in all public buildings, because we know a lot of people don't wear a mask, and we know that new variants are penetrating our vaccines. We need next generation vaccines that are transmission stopping. I think that is key, not just hospitalization preventing. And I think right now we're just not there yet. We've kind of like pretended it's over, but we still have anywhere from 2,500 to 3,000 deaths a week, and testing is all over the place. You can have wastewater and hospitalization rising, but cases are dropping or flat because people aren't testing anymore. I think as we get into the warm spring, things will get a little better, but we haven't solved the fundamental problem that this virus keeps mutating, and we're going to eventually run out of luck. With this XBB.1.5, it's pretty evasive. It's not the end of it, and it won't be the last mutation or infection. I think it will keep rolling until we actually do something about it, what we make, but we're not really doing much to truly stop it.
So every time a vaccine has become available, I've gotten it, including the bivalent one, which I got back in October, I believe, of last year. And I asked my physician, Louise and I are going to meet family in March for an annual get-together that we haven't held for 3 years, and family from all over the country. We're going to travel down to Mexico. And I said, that'll be 6 months since I got my vaccine. Should I go get a booster? And can I even get a booster? And he said, I can't prescribe it because physicians can't prescribe boosters. It'll be up to the pharmacy. You may have to lie to them or pretend to be somebody else to get it. I don't know. He said, I don't think it would hurt you, but I'm not really sure. I'm not up to date on the science. He said, the one thing I can tell you is that, in the first year of COVID, at least half the people that I saw ended up in the hospital. And now it's been 2 months since I've had a patient end up in the hospital. I do think that this current wave of COVID is less lethal than the early wave. So I'm curious your thoughts on his comments.
Well, I think the lethality is that most people have either been vaccinated or been infected. And I think that's why now it looks less lethal. It doesn't necessarily mean it's less lethal. But also that I think answering the question of can I get another booster, the rules are very fungible right now. Like many places, well, officially you're not supposed to get another booster after the bivalent, but you can easily, but there's evidence also clear that, the booster wanes after a couple months, and especially after 4 or 5 months, it definitely wanes. I also want to remind people that the Novavax vaccine has broader spectrum protection because basically it offers more of the virus than the mRNA, presenting it to your body. It has better variant protection, but it's being discontinued. It's no longer being shipped after the end of this month. So if this is your last chance to get the Novavax booster, so go to vaccines.gov, try to find a pharmacy that'll offer it. Many pharmacies will give it to you, no questions asked, or say you don't have your previous vaccine card. Right. So I think getting the Novavax vaccine, I think is a really good idea, especially gets, changing it up vaccine-wise is a good idea, but especially now before the end of the month, before it runs out.
Fascinating. Now, the New York Times featured an op-ed a couple of days ago. I think it was last Thursday or Friday. I could be wrong, but maybe it was Saturday, but it was about this H1N5 flu that has led to the slaughter of tens of millions of chickens in the United States, driving up egg prices. And now it's in the wild bird population. We've had bears who are eating dead wild birds who have convulsions and blindness as a result of it. It appears to have about 800 humans have been infected with it, always from birds, and over 500 of them have died. It appears to have over a 50% lethality rate. And there's concern that if somebody gets this virus at the same time that they've got a previous regular flu virus, that the genes for human infection could jump to this wild flu, and we could have a whole brand new pandemic that could be far more lethal than anything we've seen even since 1918. What are your thoughts on that?
So I do think it is a real risk, but is it a clear and present danger right now? This is always, what is the moment that the pandemic will, a new, disastrous pandemic will trigger? Not all pandemics are the same level of COVID. I think there could be easily a pandemic around this. Mink farms, we should honestly stop farming mink for coats and fur coats.
Yeah.
I think we need to discontinue that. But I think it could happen later this year, or it could happen in the next 2 to 15 years. It's an undetermined exact rate. Now, it's getting closer and closer to, there's more and more human transmission of H5N1, but whether or not it makes a superhuman like an adaptation where it's like super efficient in humans. Right now, it's not efficient in humans yet. Mostly, it's still mink farmers who are getting infected. And so it's like Goldilocks. It can't be too severe. If it's too severe, like Ebola, it can go pandemic, but it won't spread fast enough.
It's self-limiting.
Right. But if it's too mild, obviously the world won't really care. So it's like COVID is like this right in between, not too severe, but not too mild, but super contagious, and oftentimes contagious before you realize it, and very airborne. And that's of course the virus that takes over the world. So it's now the question, of course, is our flu vaccines. We get new flu shots each year because we have to readapt to the likely new strain. But we oftentimes mass-produce these flu batches like 9 months ahead of the actual flu season. So right now we're designing, in the next month or two, we're designing the flu shots for next year. But it's really hard to predict. That's why some years it's hit and miss. And again, this jump, it could commingle with like an existing human efficient flu strain and then have this crossover. And that's exactly what XBB.1.5 is, for COVID.
Right.
There's a crossover of several strains. It's possible. But again, it's one of those random events where eventually we will run out of luck. It will eventually happen. But whether it's going to happen this year, next year, or in 10, 15 years, that is the hard thing to say.
Fascinating stuff. There was an article in the Oregonian, in my local newspaper. I believe it was picked up off of the Associated, no, it was from Bloomberg News, that this new Merck antiviral pill, Lagevrio, Lagevrio, that the way that it works against COVID is by inducing mutations in the virus that are so severe that the virus dies. But what they're finding is that some of these mutations are not killing the virus, and now they're starting to freak out that this might produce a more dangerous form of COVID.
Right.
What's the story here, and why is this pill on the market if that's the case?
Right. This drug is called Monopiravir. They originally named it after the Mjolnir, hammer of Thor. Right. But I think it's anything but that. It's a hammer, but it's a squeaky hammer. I think of it as like a virus genetic grenade. It creates a huge slew of mutations in a virus that eventually the virus stops functioning because you blew up its genome. But there are many viruses that do survive and they compete. In many ways, it is, we were talking just minutes ago about, will we get unlucky with a mutation? Well, this is the grenade that creates mutations. It kills viruses, yes, but in a small sample, it also creates super variants.
So this is like antibiotics producing antibiotic resistance?
Yeah, it's akin to that. It's a virus. Antibiotics is for bacteria, right. But it's akin to that, right? And so in many ways, it basically naturally creates a lot of leftovers that do survive. And again, it is a mutation, grenade engine that pops leftover viruses that could actually be much worse than the original problem virus. So it's very risky. A lot of people many scientists, we've known about it from the beginning. It does work, but we want solutions that don't make the problem worse in the long run, right?
Yeah, I totally get it.
This is the problem with molnupiravir, and many doctors are just not willing to prescribe it anymore, even though it's still available.
Yeah, I totally get it. Finally, I'm curious. I've seen statistics indicating that about 10% of people who get COVID end up with long COVID. But it seems that those are mostly the people who are getting the earlier versions and variants of COVID. Is long COVID still a problem with these Omicron variants?
Oh, long COVID definitely is. Like the vaccine reduces your likelihood of long COVID, but it doesn't negate or completely prevent it. Like I think it reduces your risk of long COVID anywhere 15, 20%. It's not a surefire way to stop long COVID. The surefire way to stop long COVID is not get COVID and not get reinfected with more COVID.
Right.
Omicron is not like any milder on long COVID in any way. Omicron, in many ways, it's more evasive against your immune system than the old strains. So, and again, it's not just 1 in 10. There's some studies that show it's like 1 in 5, 1 in 3,
wow.
and depending on the symptom. So I think the long COVID is the clear and present danger, and it actually has debilitated our workforce. People are saying, where are all the service workers? Many service work industry has not recovered yet. Well, the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell, and the Bank of England Chair, they all say, it's a long COVID, and COVID actually has cut down the actual active, effective workforce who can work. And so this is where I'm saying, if you value not just your life, but your family welfare, you need to stop COVID, not just,
Right. Be careful. Wear masks. Don't go into public places. I get it. I totally get it.
Disinfection.
Dr. Feigl-Ding, thank you so much for dropping by.
Stay safe.
Great talking with you. Thank you. We'll continue the program in just a moment. I got to tell you about the demoralization syndrome in the American healthcare system. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And, of course, Joe Biden's State of the Union will be tomorrow, so right across the board, people are all hysterical about the balloon. Really? Really?